1918 was Germany's last throw of the dice. Erich Ludendorff, by now in charge of German military planning and the direction of the war effort, decided to risk all in a series of great offensives in the spring of 1918 with the goal of breaking through the English line, and the concentration was really on England, breaking through the British line and forcing the Allies to submit before American forces arrived en masse in Europe. This was a different offensive. It was planned as there would be a series of offensives along the entire front. There would be buildups along the entire front, and the Germans would use lateral lines of communication to move their men from one of the fronts to the other. And the idea was that there would be when there was a breakthrough at one, they could reinforce and go someplace else. The first push was along the Marne, was towards Paris. More on that later. It was the Germans achieved an element of surprise using new stormtrooper tactics. They had theater superiority. They busted through the line. The day is saved by the Australians, and before Paris by the Americans, where the new American troops, not really yet even ready to combat, are quickly thrown into the battle to stem the German tide. Frustrated, Ludendorff will try again, and then he will try again, and then he will try again, until by June it was clear that the offensive had failed. The Germans retire behind more defensible lines, the so-called Hindenburg lines, and the Allies begin a concerted push. One of the more remarkable aspects of this is the American push through deeply developed German trench systems. The Germans were pushed back further and further and further and further, until the situation broke with their allies. In October, the Austrians made it clear that they were going to need to withdraw from the war. This exposed Germany on its southern front. At the same time, the Ludendorff offensive, or the Kaiserschlacht, the Emperor's Battle as the Germans referred to it, had destroyed Germany's last reserves. One interesting thing that happened in preparation for the offensive, not only munitions but food supplies were brought up close to the troop jumping off points, so that the soldiers would be well fed and ready to go. This is at a time when the German people were beginning to starve because there wasn't enough food for everyone, for the soldiers and for the civil population. Germany, in the best of times, can only produce 90% of the food it needs. By 1918, people's belts were really, really tight. People sacrificed, and the High Command really squeezed the juice out of that turnip to get the food supplies forward. When the German armies began to retreat, they retreated without their ordnance and without the food. So there were whole rail cars full of food left abandoned that the British and the Americans rolled right over. The Germans were going to be in a position where they simply, on a nutritional basis, couldn't continue the war. Shouldn't surprise you. I'm an agricultural food specialist, that sort of thing. So yeah, food did them in. But I think this was really the case. The German population was simply exhausted. the British-American offensive. As the British and the Americans and the French began to push the Germans back, the push almost became a rout. Now, the Germans were able to retreat in an orderly fashion. The Americans, especially the British, could have pushed farther. And immediately after the war, there was an enormous controversy in Britain. Should the British have pushed harder, crossed the Rhine into Germany? And the answer is they simply couldn't. The British and the Americans armies were pushing as far, as fast as they could, and then they'd hit the end of their supply tether and they'd have to stop. And then the supplies would catch up and they'd push more and the supplies would hold them back. So in fact, a full-scale offensive into Germany, attractive as it was to some people on the Imperial General Staff in London, it just simply wouldn't work out because the men didn't have the supplies, the munitions, the food to go further. So that's going on. That is one thing that allowed the Germans to retire in an orderly fashion. While all this is going on, all hell began to break loose on the home front in Germany. German civilian morale had more or less continued through 1917. In 1917, there are beginnings of mutinies amongst the sailors. There are the beginnings of strikes. There are small-scale food disturbances in the major cities like Berlin. In January of 1918, munitions workers in Berlin stage a strike for higher wages because they're hungry, they want food. This strike harms the war effort afterwards, and this strike harms the war effort, although it will not have the impact that the Nazis and other nationalists will claim it is. But the home front, the unity of the German home front began to evaporate. By October, on August 22nd, the German army in the British sector around Cambrai will simply collapse. In the third week of September, General Ludendorff will inform the civilian leadership that Germany must have an armistice, a ceasefire, while it rebuilt so it could continue the war successfully. It all goes downhill from there. Ludendorff will be forced into retirement. The Germans will begin peace negotiations. Ultimately, on November 9th, the Kaiser will abdicate, a republic will be declared in Berlin, and on November 11th, an armistice will go into effect. Thank you.